In 2002, the consumer robotics company iRobot released the Roomba vacuum cleaner, which almost immediately became a huge success. For a one-time purchase of just a few $100s, you can potentially save multiple hours per week as Roomba can vacuum your floors for you. When the Roomba first came out, this was hailed as one of the first practical and affordable use cases for consumer robotics. Over the next 2 decades, iRobot sold over 40 million Roombas, generating billions of dollars in revenue. Since they IPO'd in 2005, the company has been consistently profitable, and its revenue grew to a peak of $1.5 billion in 2021. In addition to their core Roomba product, they also had large ambitions to make other home robots, including their Terra robotic lawnmower. However, in 2022, things started to change. After almost 2 decades of non-stop growth, the company's revenue started to collapse. In 2022, they posted an operating loss of $200 million, their first annual operating loss since going public. In the first 9 months of 2023, their revenue has fallen by more than 50% compared to peak levels, and their operating losses continue to accelerate. With their financial position deteriorating, their last hope was to be acquired by Amazon. But these hopes were dashed in January of this year when the European Union blocked the deal on antitrust grounds. Now, the company is hemorrhaging cash and burdened by an unsustainable debt load. With their share price having declined by 90%, it's hard to see how they can avoid bankruptcy. In this video, we'll look at how iRobot became the undisputed leader in consumer robotics in the 2000s and 2010s, and how it all came crumbling down. This video is brought to you by differentiatedanalytics.com, a website that we created. This website is a one-stop shop for investors with 5 different sections. Merger Arbitrage Intelligence provides a list of all active mergers in the US, updated weekly, and is available for free. On Short Selling Intelligence, we aggregate and summarize activist short selling reports, also available for free. We also offer a paid subscription which includes our own original short selling research, real-time ticket price data for cruise lines which can be used to help predict company earnings, real-time ticket price data for airlines which can be used for the same purpose, and real-time temperature data for all 50 US states, which can be used to forecast earnings for gas utility companies. All of these premium features are available for the low price of $20 per month, but we're currently running a promotion for 75% off if you use the promo code WSM75 at checkout. This means that you can get access to everything for just $5 per month. This promotion won't last long, so make sure to sign up now. And with the free resources, this website is accessible to anyone, so make sure to check it out by clicking the link in the description below. And now back to the video. iRobot was founded in 1990 and originally didn't focus on vacuums at all. Their first product was a military robot called PackBot, which could remove and dispose of unexploded ordnance on the battlefield. The problem with these types of robots is that sales volume will always be low. Given their niche use cases, the military will only order a few dozen or 100 at most. Even if the unit price is high, it's very difficult to sell enough of them to cover the massive research and development expense. Around the year 2000, iRobot's co-founder and CEO Colin Angle had an epiphany. The key to success in the robotics industry is not to make the most technologically advanced robot. Instead, they should make the cheapest robot possible that can actually do something useful. So in 2002, they released the Roomba robot vacuum cleaner. At the price of just $200, it was accessible to millions of households. iRobot was not the first company to develop a robot vacuum cleaner. In 2001, the Swedish company Electrolux released the Trilobite. Its technology was groundbreaking at the time. It used ultrasonic sensors to detect walls and other obstacles. This allows its computer to make a digital map of the room. The Trilobite basically used the same technology that dolphins use to find prey. It sends out ultrasound waves and senses the sound that echoes back to identify objects. The problem was the ultrasound sensors in the computer required to make this work were extremely expensive. The technology was also immature and prone to errors. The Trilobite's starting price of $1,800 made it inaccessible to many people. Very few people were willing to pay so much money for an over-engineered gimmicky device that barely works. iRobot saw the failure of the Trilobite and knew they needed to take a different approach. The Roomba was successful not because it had advanced technology, it was actually the opposite. The Roomba was successful because of its simple design and relatively primitive technology. The only sensor on the Roomba was a bumper on the front. It's basically a giant button so it can sense if it bumps into something. The Roomba made no attempt to map the room. Instead, it followed a very simple formula. If the Roomba bumps into something, it will turn in a random direction and drive away. The Roomba has no idea what the room looks like. All it knows is when it bumps into something, it should turn in a different direction. Because of the inefficiency of the random walk, it can take a long time to clean a room. Some spots on the floor will be cleaned multiple times, and some parts will be missed. The genius of Roomba's design was its cost. It only required one primitive sensor and an extremely primitive processor. Instead of trying to manufacture it themselves, iRobot hired contract manufacturers in China where labor was cheap. This allowed them to sell the device for just $200, making it the first truly accessible consumer robot. Throughout the 2000s and early 2010s, iRobot dominated the market. Their revenue grew consistently almost every year. Thanks to their use of cheap contract manufacturers in China, their gross margins were also high. This allowed them to spend heavily on advertising to build up their brand awareness, while still having enough money left over for a healthy operating margin. Of course, success invites competition. In 2010, the German company Nito Robotics released the first robot vacuum to incorporate a light detection and ranging, or LiDAR system. It's similar to what Electrolux tried 10 years prior with the Trilobite. But instead of using ultrasound, it emits laser light in a frequency not visible to the human eye. It can detect objects by the reflections in the laser light. This allows the Nito to make a map of the room and navigate it in an organized manner, as opposed to the random walk of the Roomba. The downside of using LiDAR is that it's expensive. When the Nito was launched in 2010, it cost $400, roughly double the cost of the Roomba. Remember that iRobot's entire strategy up to this point was to keep costs as low as possible. Given the high cost of LiDAR sensors, they were naturally averse to using them. Here's a short clip of iRobot's CEO explaining why they don't use LiDAR in 2019.
An important moment, maybe 2 years ago, where you could put machine vision capable processors on robots at consumer price points. And I was waiting for it to happen. We had avoided putting lasers on our robots to do navigation, and instead spent years researching how to do vision-based navigation, because you could just see it where these technology trends were going. And between injection molded plastic and a camera with a computer capable of running machine learning and visual object recognition, I could build an incredibly affordable, incredibly capable robot. And that's going to be the future.
Regular cameras are much cheaper than LiDAR sensors. iRobot's CEO believed that with advances in artificial intelligence, they could achieve the same or better performance with cameras instead of LiDAR. iRobot started using something called Visual Simultaneous Location and Mapping, or VSLAM for short. A camera is mounted on top of the Roomba. By looking at the ceiling and other visible landmarks, the robot's computer can infer the location of objects and make a map of the room. With VSLAM, the Roomba was finally able to vacuum the floor in a non-random way. While VSLAM is an innovative solution, LiDAR is still far more accurate. The LiDAR is able to identify objects lower to the ground that the VSLAM camera would miss as it's angled upwards. The advantage of LiDAR is that it has depth perception. The LiDAR can see something right in front of it and can tell how far away it is. This is how it's able to make a map of the room. This is much more difficult to do with a camera because it has to identify any object it could possibly come across. This is one of the reasons that developing self-driving cars is so difficult. Using camera-based computer vision on a robot vacuum is actually much more difficult than making an autonomous car. The variety of household objects and room configurations is almost infinite, so the computer has to be smart enough to identify objects it has never seen before. iRobot thought that they could develop artificial intelligence models powerful enough to solve this problem. They were wrong. To this day, their robot vacuums are still using VSLAM, which is less accurate and has inferior performance compared to LiDAR-based vacuums. Remember that iRobot uses contract manufacturers based in China. Given that these facilities already exist, it's very easy for Chinese startups to design their own robot vacuums and use the same contract manufacturers. One of iRobot's contract manufacturers is BYD. BYD is best known as an electric car manufacturer, but they also make batteries for consumer products and do contract manufacturing for a wide range of electrical appliances, including robot vacuums. There's a robot vacuum company called Lafant, which also appears to use BYD as its contract manufacturer. The point is, given that the infrastructure already exists, it's extremely easy for Chinese companies to enter the market. Historically, Chinese robot vacuum companies have competed primarily on cost. Take the example of this vacuum for sale on Amazon for $145, cheaper than any Roomba model. It's completely unbranded. There is no name brand or logo on the vacuum itself. Even the product title does not mention its brand name. The strategy is to spend as little as possible on research and development or marketing. This allows them to make the products as cheap as possible and undercut iRobot on price. At first, iRobot didn't view these cheap unbranded competitors as a threat, as the Roomba still had a quality advantage over most of them. However, the competition from China ended up being far more serious than they expected. In the late 2010s, the Chinese companies Ecovacs and Roborock started competing on the high end of the market, developing branded and technologically advanced robot vacuums. Unlike iRobot, both Ecovacs and Roborock opted to use LiDAR sensors, giving them a clear advantage in mapping rooms and navigating the floor efficiently. In addition to LiDAR, Roborock and Ecovacs have developed other features. For example, the flagship models of both brands have auto-disposal features, so you don't have to remove the dust tray manually. They can also detect whether they are on a hard floor or a carpet and automatically switch between vacuuming and mopping. The most advanced models can cost over $1,000, far more than what Roombas sell for. There are a surprising number of news websites and YouTube channels dedicated to robot vacuums. Pretty much all of them agree that Roborock and Ecovacs are leaders. For example, this article from the New Zealand publication RoboMate is comparing the latest Roborock and Ecovacs vacuums. They don't even consider iRobot as a serious contender due to its lack of LiDAR. In a recent video, the YouTube channel Vacuum Wars compared over 90 different robot vacuums on a variety of different performance metrics. Of the top 5 overall picks, they were all Chinese brands. The 2 mid-price picks were also Chinese brands. The iRobot Roomba only won in the budget category. As recently as 2016, iRobot had a dominant 65% share of the global robot vacuum market. On the high end, they're losing share to Roborock and Ecovacs. On the low end, they're losing share to countless unbranded ultra-budget Chinese models. As of 2020, iRobot's market share declined to 45%. Since then, their market shares continue to decline, although we don't have exact data. Despite losing market share since 2016, iRobot still posted positive revenue growth through 2021, as the overall market was still expanding. But we could start to see the financial impact in 2021. Despite achieving record revenue, iRobot's gross profit actually declined, and their operating profit declined to almost zero. iRobot was forced to cut prices on many of its robots to keep up with the Chinese competitors. The next 2 years were catastrophic, with revenue imploding by more than 50%, and after more than a decade of profitability, their operating profit turned sharply negative. They are now burning cash and have $200 million of debt. So how did iRobot, the undisputed leader in robot vacuums for 2 decades, see its business collapse in just 2 years? The most surprising aspect of iRobot's decline is that throughout this whole period, they spent far more on research and development than any of their Chinese competitors. For example, in the first 9 months of 2023, iRobot spent $117 million on R&D, while Ecovacs spent just $85 million. Yet Ecovacs' premium models are universally considered to be far better than anything iRobot has been able to come up with. So how did iRobot fall so far behind despite having such a large head start? Just because you have the largest R&D budget doesn't mean you'll come up with the best innovations. There were a couple big mistakes that iRobot made. Remember how the CEO said they didn't need LiDAR because their artificial intelligence would eventually become so advanced that they can do just as well with regular cameras. They indeed invested a huge amount of money trying to develop AI models to do just that. It turns out that this problem is far more difficult to solve than they originally thought. Despite a huge amount of investment, their camera-based systems are still far inferior to LiDAR. There is also a more fundamental problem. After achieving dominant market share in robot vacuum cleaners, they became arrogant. They didn't view the Chinese competitors as a threat, thinking that they could only make cheap, low-quality vacuums. So they diverted a substantial part of their R&D budget to new product categories. For example, since at least 2015, they've been trying to develop a robotic lawnmower. There have been a few key problems. If you've ever mowed a lawn, you will know that grass clippings get thrown around everywhere. The camera on the robot will inevitably become obstructed by grass or other debris. Also, the lawnmower vibrates up and down significantly due to the power of the blade. This would confuse the robot if it tries to use computer vision. The intense vibrations also make LiDAR unworkable. Due to the technical challenges, the lawnmower was repeatedly delayed and to this day has not been launched. iRobot also created programmable educational robots, which kids can use to learn about coding and robotics. Perhaps their strangest business expansion came when they acquired a Swiss air purification company called Aeris in 2021. The air purifiers are not robots, and it's hard to see how this has any synergies with their core business of robot vacuums. Because iRobot felt so secure with its dominant market share in vacuums, they got distracted trying to expand into new product categories, almost all of which ended up being flops. This distraction caused them to neglect their core business, allowing competitors like Roborock and Ecovacs to surpass them. By the summer of 2022, it had become obvious that iRobot was facing increasing competitive pressures, and its stock had fallen by 70% from its all-time highs. Amazon took advantage of this and offered to acquire the company for $1.7 billion. While this was much lower than iRobot's all-time high valuation, shareholders were happy to take the deal given the company's deteriorating situation. Amazon has long been trying to build an ecosystem of smart home devices such as the Alexa voice assistant and the Ring smart doorbell. By acquiring iRobot, they could integrate Roomba into their ecosystem, which could further enhance their smart home value proposition. But there was a problem. More than 20% of iRobot's sales are done through Amazon. That percentage is even higher for some of iRobot's competitors. Regulators feared that if Amazon acquired iRobot, they could give Roomba priority on search results in an effort to boost sales. In other words, they would have an incentive to shadow ban Roomba's competitors. This would give Roomba an unfair advantage. In January of 2024, the European Competition Authority blocked the merger. This was a disaster for iRobot. The Amazon acquisition was the last chance for their shareholders to cash out. Now they're stuck with a rapidly declining and money-losing business. iRobot is in a truly desperate situation. They have $190 million of cash on hand, but they also have a $200 million term loan that matures in 2026. They're burning cash at a rate of $150 million per year. They'll get a roughly $100 million termination fee from Amazon, but unless they can turn things around, this will only delay their bankruptcy by a few more quarters. Right now, after the Amazon deal was blocked, iRobot announced a restructuring plan, which they say will save $80 to $100 million in annual operating costs. The first part of this plan is firing the co-founder and CEO Colin Angle, who has led the company for the past 20 years. They're also laying off 1/3 of their workforce, pulling out of underperforming geographies, and axing all of their non-core businesses including the lawnmower, educational robots, and air purifiers. They will focus exclusively on their core Roomba product. While the restructuring is probably a good idea, it might be too late. Even if they cut $100 million of annual costs, they're currently burning cash at a rate of $150 million per year. So unless they can reverse their declining revenue, they'll still be losing money. If anything, their revenue decline will probably accelerate as their marketing and R&D budgets will take a massive hit from the restructuring. At this point, Ecovacs and Roborock are so far ahead of iRobot that no matter what they do, it's probably too late. iRobot is a story of arrogance and complacency. They were a pioneer in robotic vacuums, but instead of defending their position with continuous innovation, they began expanding into ever more unrelated products. This provided an opening for their competitors to overtake them on their core business. Alright guys, that wraps it up for this video. What do you think about iRobot? Let us know in the comments section below. Also, don't forget to check out our new website, differentiatedanalytics.com, and take advantage of our limited time 75% off promotion with promo code WSM75. As always, thank you so much for watching and we'll see you in the next one. Wall Street Millennial, signing out.